So I'm finally getting around to piecing together this lawnmower, which is a Bolens, older one. It needs quite a bit of work, but thankfully the season started to pick up finally, and I had sold a mower yesterday very quickly. Basically, this thing needs a lot of stuff added to it. This is the condition that I got it in. This was a Carb find. This thing does have compression, but is currently missing a couple. It's missing the carburetor, the tank, the SparkPlug, the air filter box, the PCV line, and I've actually got the carburetor linkage. It's in there. It did have that, amazingly, but all the hardware is, of course, not present. So I'm going to have to dig some hardware out of my stock, and then it's also missing the starter recoil, which I have another one right here that should fit onto this one just fine. All of these parts I got out of my my hoard over there, the shelf, and I've got one more gas tank that's in better condition, but I just cleaned this one out pretty well, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this one, and if need be I'll just spray paint it or something, if I really feel the need to. But in my experience, beautifying lawnmowers has not really done much to add to their value, so it's never really something I've concentrated on all that much. But here's the carburetor from this gas tank. I cleaned up okay. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot better than it was. And here's the carburetor gasket. These are brand new. Here's a spark plug that I got out of the hoard, and a new primer bulb. And I ended up robbing some hardware off another junk motor that's just like this one. Got a gasket from another carburetor, got the spring, got some nuts and bolts, got the main tank bolt, which is 1/2 inch, and this linkage cover, which also doubles as the bushing. It goes right there. So now I'm just kind of throwing everything back together, and might as well throw that spark plug in just to kind of close up this hole. Alright, so it's day 2 with this thing, and it's nice and wet outside. It's been raining all morning and it just let up for a minute, but it's supposed to start here again. I'm getting my damn tripod set up. Show you guys what I've gotten done so far. I got the linkage installed onto the carburetor, got that other smaller piece on, the guard that goes in the back, carburetor and the tank are obviously on. The spring is installed. Now I think it's supposed to be underneath it. I'll attend to that as such, but I think I have that backwards. Fix it in a minute. But other than that, I might need to find some more errant hardware that's lying around, but all I really need to do now is just clean off the grounding point right there, and then throw the recoil on, and then stick a new handle on the end of it. There's the new handle, all sized up nice and neat. I also took a plastic bristle brush and some carb cleaner and just cleaned that up a little bit. Didn't need much carb cleaner, but it cleaned up very nicely. Now typically when I'm done getting these all ready to go, I go and pressure wash them. And this one, unfortunately, this recoil assembly is too old for this to bolt into it, unfortunately. I mean, yeah, I could drill out some holes for it and maybe tap in some new bolts, but it's really not a huge deal. But what I will do is probably touch it up a bit with some spray paint. I do have quite a bit of spray paint actually, but other than that, it's almost just about ready to go. All I have left to do is just find some smaller 1/4 inch hardware and bolt those through the dipstick tube. There's the new air filter unit, which I'm not going to put that on just yet until I know this thing runs good, and then we'll go from there. I actually ended up finding a different recoil in the hoard. The one that I had on there wasn't wound up enough, or the spring was starting to wear out, so I just pulled that one off, and I already had it off, so I just threw another one on and put a new handle and string on it. So everything else is all bolted back together. So I guess now the next point we've got to do is just throw some gas in it and see if we can get her to start. I'm going to recheck the oil level as well. From time to time this does happen. I do have a whole thing full of used spark plugs, and occasionally, though rarely, they do fail right out of the box. So I just threw another spark plug in there that's actually newer. It looks like it's never been used before. There was no carbon buildup or anything on the plug. It just was not in a box. So I got that to the proper gap and threw it in, and you guys will be pleasantly surprised. I think this thing is going to run decently well. A couple primes, handle down, which I might go ahead and replace this cable if I've got another one. So the mower needs a new blade. The one that's on it's pretty well torn up. So I've got a brand new one on the right and a semi-used one on the left, both of which are very sharp. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace that. It didn't want to start up at first because I just had the mower on its side and I was looking at the blade, so that's why that happened. But let's go ahead and disconnect the spark plug and tip it over and remove that blade. And so got it on its side, spark plug's disconnected. I want to show you guys a trick on how I remove these things if I'm not using an air impact wrench, which is honestly my preferred method of doing it. But I don't feel like turning the compressor on, so this is how I do it. You don't need any sort of fancy tool. Just like that. I just put my foot in front of it. These are steel-toed shoes, so you know, again, take that for what you will. And I just loosen the bolt up with a breaker bar. Very easy, very simple. You know, not really too much you can screw up there. Some people have, you know, their own way of doing this, but that's just the way I do it. And then I just go ahead and remove it like so. And there's the old nasty blade. So we'll flip it back over. I'm actually going to go ahead and change the oil as well. Show you guys what kind of condition the oil is in. I believe it was fairly black when I checked it. Oh yeah. It's definitely a little black. Needs to be changed. And that's just really something I always do out of standard practice. I mean, there are some instances where I don't bother changing the oil because it's not really needed. But when it's this black and it's probably the original oil that it came from the factory, I'm just going to go ahead and change it. Oil's now draining out. We'll fill her up when she's good and drained. And so because it's actually a better oil and much cheaper than the normal Briggs & Stratton 30 weight, which costs about $7 a quart, I like to use this Rotella T1 straight grade 30. It's perfectly fine for lawnmowers. It's definitely overkill for a lawnmower, but for our purposes, you can't really beat it. I've been using this stuff for a couple years now, and I've been very happy with it. I use it in all my personal stuff, and it's just a very heavy-duty oil, and it's very highly reviewed on sites like Bob is the Oil Guy. So I'll give it a smidge more, let it sit for a second, then we'll check the level. So we'll verify the level. I think it'll be just fine. And I don't know if the camera can see that, of course, but the level is right where it should be. There you go. So I'm going to go ahead and let this thing run for a little bit. You guys can see a little bit of that. Let her get good and warm, see if we have any issues, and then we'll go ahead and throw everything else back on the mower. And you guys will see a final look and start of this thing in a separate video after it's all cleaned up. Frankenstein's on, the gas tank, carburetor, some other odds and ends, hardware. The bag is obviously from a different lawnmower, but it's all nice and wet outside. Let's go ahead and give her a start. Also that replaced blade on it. I guess I need to tighten up that exhaust a little bit, but other than that it seems to run okay. That blade isn't 100% balanced, but it's a lot better than the other one was. So I'll probably whip that off and sharpen it up and properly balance it before I go about cleaning this thing, or probably that'll be done about the same time. But you guys can look forward to a completed video of this after it's all cleaned up and ready to go.